In the 1980s, the world's railways gambled on the future. Engineers built locomotives that tilted through curves at 160 miles an hour, thought with microprocessors, and hauled coal on electricity alone. On paper, pure genius. In reality, engines that shook themselves apart. A train pulled from service after just 4 days. A machine literally named high reliability that could barely stay running. These are 10 brilliant locomotives from the 1980s that failed, some of them spectacularly. Let's count them down. Number 10. The GE C39-8. Let's start with a machine that wasn't a disaster, so much as a rough first draft that history quietly skipped over. By the mid-1980s, General Electric was closing in on Electromotive, the company that had ruled American railroading for decades. GE's weapon was the -8 line, a new generation of locomotives with microprocessor controls that promised smarter, more efficient freight power. The C39-8 was the 6-axle heavy hauler in that family, a 3,900 horsepower brute built around GE's 16-cylinder 7FDL engine, produced between 1984 and 1987. Here was the problem. The very first C39-8s, the ones rail fans later nicknamed the classic -8s, were essentially rolling test beds. They carried the new brains, but not the refinements that came from actually running them hard in service. The cab sat slightly below the roofline. The body had an awkward hump behind the cab, and the units were noticeably less polished than what came next. And what came next arrived almost immediately. In 1987, GE introduced the improved C39-8E, built to the specifications of the new C40-8, which quickly proved far more reliable and became the model that genuinely started dethroning EMD. The original classic units were left looking obsolete only a couple of years after they rolled out. In total, only about 161 C39-8s were built, almost entirely for Norfolk Southern and Conrail. They did real work for years, so calling them a catastrophe would be unfair. But they're the forgotten stepping stone, the version that got leapfrogged before the ink was even dry. Brilliant idea, awkward execution, short shelf life. Every revolution has that one prototype nobody wants to remember. For the -8, this was it, and that's exactly why it kicks off our list. Number 9. The EMD GP50. Now to a locomotive that was fast, powerful, and showed up to the party about 5 years too late. Through the 1960s and 70s, the 4-axle Jeep was the backbone of American railroading. EMD's GP42 sold over 1,100 units, so when EMD rolled out the GP50 in May 1980, the logic seemed obvious. Take that beloved formula and crank the power up to 3,500 horsepower. Add cutting-edge microprocessor controls and a radar-based wheel slip system called Super Series, and you'd have the ultimate 4-axle road unit. There was just one catch. The railroads had already moved on. By 1980, the industry was abandoning 4-axle locomotives for mainline work and switching to 6-axle units that put more power to the rail and rode better on wet track. A high-horsepower, high-maintenance 4-axle machine was suddenly a solution to a problem that barely existed anymore. On top of that, the early 1980s brought a brutal recession and a wave of railroad mergers, so companies were parking locomotives, not buying new ones. And then there was the engine. The GP50 used the same stressed-out 3,500 horsepower version of the 645 engine as its troubled 6-axle cousin, and it brought many of the same reliability headaches with it, problems that, according to locomotive historians, were never really solved on this model. The result? Just 278 GP50s were built before production ended in 1985, a rounding error next to the GP42's numbers. Only 5 railroads bought them. Many were quickly bumped down to yard and local duty, and plenty were later rebuilt or scrapped. It was a genuinely advanced locomotive that arrived at the exact wrong moment, carrying the exact wrong engine. Great machine, terrible timing, and the market simply wasn't listening. Number 8. The BC Rail GF6C. This one is so obscure that most rail enthusiasts have never even seen a photo, and it's one of the boldest experiments on this entire list. In the early 1980s, BC Rail in British Columbia built a brand new line, the Tumbler Ridge subdivision to haul metallurgical coal out of the remote Quintet and Bull Moose mines. The route had a serious engineering challenge. 2 enormously long tunnels, one over 5.5 miles, another nearly 4, with no ventilation. Run diesel locomotives through those and you'd choke the crews and the machinery on their own exhaust. So BC Rail made a radical choice. It electrified the line at a colossal 50,000 volts, one of the highest railway electrification voltages ever used, and ordered 7 purpose-built electric locomotives to run it. These were the GF6C units built in 1983 and 1984 by General Motors Diesel in Canada, in partnership with the Swedish electrical giant ASE. Cleverly, they were bolted onto the proven frame and running gear of the rock-solid SD42, so the mechanical side was bulletproof, wrapped in a sleek wide-cab body. On paper, it was elegant, heavy, quiet, powerful electric haulage, tailor-made for one difficult line. And it worked. The locomotives did their job hauling coal down to the interchange with Canadian National, where diesels took over for the rest of the journey. But here's the fatal flaw. The whole system was tied to a single long-term coal contract with overseas steel mills. When that business dried up and the mines wound down around the turn of the millennium, the entire reason for the line evaporated. BC Rail simply switched the power off. The overhead wires came down, the line was de-electrified, and 6 of the 7 unique locomotives were hauled away and cut up for scrap around 2004. Only one, number 6001, survives, preserved at a museum in Prince George. A brilliant, one-of-a-kind machine, killed not by a flaw in its design, but by economics it could never control. Number 7. The MLW Bombardier HR616. Number 7 wins the award for the most ironic name in locomotive history. Because they called it high reliability, it was anything but. To understand this one, you have to know that the legendary American locomotive company Alco stopped building locomotives in the United States in 1969. But its Canadian offshoot, the Montreal Locomotive Works, kept the old Alco designs alive well into the 1980s, eventually under the ownership of Bombardier. The HR series was their last big swing, a final attempt to keep Alco's engineering breathing in a market now dominated by EMD and GE. The name told you everything about the ambition. HR stood for high reliability. The 616 meant 6 axles and a 16-cylinder engine. Introduced in 1982, it was a 3,000 horsepower freight locomotive powered by the classic Alco 251 engine, and it even debuted a slick new cowl body with an angled rear section, Canadian National's clever draper-taper design that improved rearward visibility. There was just one problem. The high-reliability locomotive wasn't reliable at all. It was plagued by the very same electrical and mechanical gremlins that had haunted its Alco-powered predecessors, the exact problems the name was supposed to promise it had solved. Word got around fast. Only Canadian National ever bought the HR616, taking a grand total of 20 units. No one else placed a single order. That was it. 20 locomotives, 1 customer, and a reputation that sank almost on arrival. Those 20 machines soldiered on through the 1980s and into the 90s before CN retired the whole batch by the late 1990s. And when the last of them went to the scrapper, every single one was eventually cut up. It didn't just end a locomotive class. It effectively ended the entire Alco engineering lineage in North America, a proud 60-year design tradition bowing out under a name it couldn't live up to. Number 6. The Bud SPV 2000. Now, a quick honest note. This one is technically a self-propelled passenger rail car, rather than a road locomotive. But its story is such a perfect example of brilliant idea, miserable failure, that it earns a spot, and its nickname alone makes it unforgettable. Back in the 1950s, the Bud Company built one of the most beloved pieces of equipment in American rail history, the Rail Diesel Car, or RDC. It was a self-powered passenger car, no separate locomotive needed, and it was simple, tough, and adored. So in the late 1970s, as Bud's railcar business was fading, the company reached for one last hit, It would build a modern RDC for the space age. The result, built between 1978 and 1981, was the SPV-2000, a self-propelled vehicle designed to serve right through the year 2000, which is where the name came from. It used the sleek stainless steel body of Amtrak's new Amfleet cars, packed in 2 Detroit diesel engines, and was designed to hit up to 120 miles an hour. Bud was so confident, it projected orders in the hundreds. The reality was humbling. Only about 31 were ever built, at roughly $1 million each. Far too expensive for most transit agencies, so buyers backed out. The handful that were built for agencies in Connecticut, New York, and even the Royal Train of Morocco turned out to be mechanically unreliable, hobbled by troublesome automatic transmissions and a cramped design that made even simple maintenance a nightmare. The cars became such a headache that they were frequently towed by locomotives instead of running under their own power, which earned them the cruelest nickname on this entire list. Railroaders started calling them seldom-powered vehicles. Amtrak had seen enough and pulled its SPV-2000s from service on January 12, 1986, replacing them with ordinary locomotive-hauled trains. And with that flop, one of the great names in American railcar building quietly reached the end of the line. Number 5. The British Rail Class 58. Halfway there. Number 5 is a locomotive built to conquer the world that never left home. In the late 1970s, British Rail had a plan. Its freight fleet was aging. The previous Class 56 had endured a rocky birth, and Britain wanted back into the global locomotive export business. So engineers designed something genuinely forward-thinking, a low-cost, easy-to-maintain heavy freight locomotive using an idea borrowed straight from America: modular construction. Instead of building the machine as one integrated body, the Class 58 was assembled from separate modules that could be lifted off the underframe for quick repairs or even swapped out entirely. It was so clearly aimed at foreign buyers that early drawings literally labeled it the standard export locomotive. The first unit was handed over in December 1982, and 50 were built at Doncaster Works through 1987. And then came the run of bad luck that turned a smart design into a commercial dead end. First, the export orders never came, not a single one. The whole point of the locomotive, selling it around the world, simply didn't happen. Second, the Class 58 was built for Britain's coal traffic, hauling merry-go-round trains from pits to power stations. But the bitter miners' strike of 1984 and 85, followed by waves of mine closures, gutted exactly the work these locomotives were made for. And third, when American builder EMD sent its Class 59 locomotives to Britain in 1986, machines with astonishing reliability figures around 95%, any lingering hope of export interest evaporated. So the standard export locomotive became a fleet that only ever worked one country's railways. When the jigs at Doncaster were dismantled, the very last Class 58 became the final diesel locomotive ever built at that historic plant. The class was withdrawn in Britain by 2002, after only around 19 years, short of the long career expected of it. In a final twist, dozens were then hired out to work abroad, in France, Spain, and the Netherlands, finally reaching the export markets, just as somebody else's rented workhorses. Most were eventually scrapped. Number 4. The British Rail Class 89. Number 4 is one of the loneliest locomotives ever built in Britain, a machine that was made obsolete before it was even finished. In the early 1980s, British Rail was finally electrifying the East Coast Main Line, the great artery running north from London to Edinburgh. That meant it needed a new generation of powerful electric locomotives. The engineering firm Brush Traction responded with something spectacular and completely unlike anything Britain had run before, a streamlined production prototype called the Class 89. It broke the mold in every sense. Where all previous British AC electrics rode on a 4-axle arrangement, the Class 89 used 6 axles. It had 2 sloping HST-style cabs, carried around 6,000 horsepower, could touch 125 miles an hour, and packed genuinely advanced electronic control systems. The vision was a whole fleet of these machines, modernizing Britain's main north-south routes at a single stroke. Here's the heartbreak. While Brush was busy building the prototype, British Rail changed its mind. Planners decided the future was fixed-formation trains hauled by a different design, what became the Class 91, running at even higher speeds. And that decision was made before the Class 89 prototype had even turned a wheel. So the fleet was cancelled. Just one Class 89 was ever built, number 89001, completed in 1986. It picked up affectionate nicknames, the Badger, the Aardvark, and in 1989 it was formally named Avocet by Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher herself. It ran as a test bed, then hauled passenger trains between London and Leeds. But being a one-off is a curse. With no fleet, spare parts and maintenance were a constant struggle. After a serious failure in the early 1990s, this unique, non-standard machine was withdrawn as surplus. A new operator, GNER, rescued and overhauled it in the late 1990s during a locomotive shortage, only for it to break down again and be pulled from service in 2001. The story does have a happy epilogue. Enthusiasts saved 89001 for preservation, and after a long restoration, it has since returned to the rails as a heritage machine. But as the fleet it was meant to lead, it was a fleet of exactly one. Number 3. The Bombardier LRC, onto the podium. Number 3 is a train whose single most brilliant feature was the exact feature that let it down. In the 1970s and 80s, Canada faced the same challenge as much of the world. How do you run trains faster on old curvy tracks without rebuilding thousands of miles of railway? The answer, dreamed up by the Montreal Locomotive Works and later Bombardier, was the LRC, standing for Light, Rapid, Comfortable. Its trick was active tilting. Sensors and hydraulics would lean the train into curves, letting it whip through bends at higher speed while passengers stayed comfortable. The locomotive itself was a fascinating machine. Low-slung, blunt-nosed, futuristic, and powered by the trusty Alco 251 engine. In fact, it was the last all-new locomotive type in North America built around that classic engine. Via Rail put the LRC to work in 1981 on the busy Quebec City-Toronto-Windsor corridor. And when everything clicked, riders praised its smooth, quiet ride. But that headline tilting system, the whole reason the train existed, was a mechanical nightmare in the early years. The banking mechanism required constant attention and repeatedly acted up, so crews often simply switched it off. A train built to lean through curves spent much of its life running bolt upright at ordinary speeds, its signature ability quietly disabled. There were other early gremlins too, including a wheel bearing scare in 1983 that sidelined dozens of cars for inspection. The verdict from the wider industry was brutal. Amtrak leased 2 LRC sets to try them out in the United States, and after 2 years, in 1982, it handed them back and declined to buy. No other railroad ever ordered them, only VIA operated the LRC, and the locomotives were retired around the year 2000, replaced by conventional American diesels. Here's the redemption though. Bombardier kept refining that tilting technology, and it eventually matured into the systems that power tilting trains around the world, including Amtrak's Acela. The LRC's big idea was right. It was just about 15 years too early to make it work reliably. Number 2. The EMD SD50. Number 2 isn't just a failed locomotive. It's the locomotive that many people say cost EMD its crown. For decades, Electromotive was the undisputed king of American diesels. Its SD42 was a masterpiece, thousands sold, rock solid, trusted everywhere. But by the early 1980s, General Electric was surging, offering more powerful units and aggressive financing. EMD needed a bigger, more modern flagship fast, so it built the SD50. The pitch was outstanding. A 6-axle road unit producing 3,500 and later 3,600 horsepower. A real leap over the SD42 with new digital microprocessor controls and improved pulling power. It debuted in 1981 and looked like the future. But to hit that horsepower, EMD made a fateful decision. Instead of designing a new engine, it took the existing 16-cylinder 645 engine and pushed it harder than it was ever meant to run, up to 950 revolutions per minute, well beyond its comfort zone. Engineers and railroaders alike were uneasy about squeezing that much out of an old design. Their fears were justified. The SD50 became notorious. It suffered engine failures, cracked crankshafts, blown power assemblies, electrical and microprocessor faults, overheating, and stalls. By some accounts, units were leaving the factory with dozens of defects each before they'd even hauled a train. It was, in short, a locomotive that created more problems than it solved. Railroads noticed. Years later, CSX was so frustrated it deliberately derated its SD50s from 3,500 back down to 3,000 horsepower just to make them survive. And in the middle of all this, a milestone quietly passed. In 1985, for the first time, General Electric outsold EMD. The company that had owned American railroading for half a century had been overtaken, and the stumbling, overstressed SD50 is widely blamed for opening the door. Around 430 were built before EMD pulled the plug and rushed out the SD60 with a proper new engine, the 710, which fixed the problem. But the damage was done. The SD50 wasn't just a bad locomotive, it was the moment a dynasty cracked. Number 1. The British Rail Advanced Passenger Train. And at number 1, the most famous, brilliant but failed train in railway history. The one that was so far ahead of its time, it became a national punchline, the British Rail Advanced Passenger Train. In the 1970s, Britain watched with envy as France ran the TGV and Japan ran the Shinkansen on sleek, purpose-built high-speed lines. Britain couldn't afford new lines. Its main routes were Victorian, twisting through curve after curve. So its engineers set out to solve the problem with sheer brilliance instead of concrete. They would build a train that leaned. The APT pioneered active tilting on a scale no one had attempted for public service, leaning the coaches into curves so it could take them far faster without throwing passengers around. And it wasn't just the tilt. The APT had astonishing hydrokinetic brakes, powerful enough to stop a very fast train within the existing signal spacing, a genuinely crucial innovation. The experimental version set a British rail speed record of over 152 miles per hour in 1975. The prototype pushed that to 162 miles per hour in 1979, a British record that would stand for more than 20 years. On paper, it was the most advanced train in the world. And then came December 1981. British Rail invited the press aboard for the grand public debut, running from Glasgow to London. The first run went well, but the return journey was a catastrophe in front of the cameras. In bitter winter cold, the tilt system failed on some coaches, leaving them stuck leaning. The brakes froze. Passengers reportedly felt queasy. The newspapers had a field day, and the train was withdrawn from service just 4 days after its glorious launch. The engineers actually fixed most of the problems, and the APT quietly returned in 1984. But it was too late. The reputation was shattered. Everyone in authority had run for cover, and the whole project was scrapped by 1986. 2 of the 3 trains were broken up. Here's the final painful irony. Because British rail managers hadn't wanted to bet everything on the APT, they'd built a conventional, non-tilting backup train, the high-speed train, the Intercity 125. That backup became one of the most successful and beloved trains ever made, running for decades. The revolutionary APT died in disgrace. Its safe little sibling became a legend, and the tilting technology it perfected, Britain eventually bought it back from Italy. If you enjoyed this trip through the railway's most glorious failures, let me know down in the comments which of these 10 surprised you the most, and which forgotten locomotive you think deserved a spot on this list. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.